All right, young scholars. This week we are again going to cover HTML. Again, if you click on course information and head into the 129 folder and open today's PowerPoint 129.24, you'll notice today's PowerPoints. So why do we not want to use basic HTML forms? Well, they're boring, limited, and hard to store information. They don't really do much for us. So, as you may be reminded from last week, our form tag and our close form tag define a form, and our input type tag defines a form input. We could have button, checkbox, file, hidden, image, password, radio, reset, submit, or text, among other options. So among these input types, text displays a single line of text input field. Radio allows you to select one or many choices. Checkbox allows you to select 0 of many choices. Submit submits a form. Any type of input type that's a button simply displays a clickable button for you. So this is an HTML example used within the WYSIWYG that allows you to utilize a PHP form. So this form action page.php refers to a PHP form action, the action, it's doing so. So if we go into our WYSIWYG and copy this code and run, if we enter the first name John, last name Doe, and submit, your input was received as first name equals John and last name equals Doe. Here's an example. Only 2 inputs are allowed. Both inputs are simply text. In the form action page.php, this does all the work of sending the information. The server processed the input and answered with this return. This action page.php is stored on this w3schools.com web server. That's why the PHP can run. You'll see more PHP examples next week. But PHP only runs when it is stored somewhere on a web page or web server. An HTML form with no PHP simply has the form tag here, and it does not send the input anywhere. On slide number 9 here, you'll notice that we have an issue. Input type equals text, ID equals fname, name equals fname, value equals John. What's the difference between this one and the one above it? Well, the second one has the name equals fname. This one here does not and would not run appropriately because it does not have both ID and name to run properly. Here is an example of how you would define radio buttons. In this example, form input type equals radio. Fairly simple. Then you would do similar with a checkbox. Input type equals checkbox. Vehicle 1, bike. Vehicle 2, car. Vehicle 3, boat. And then you would do very similar with the countless other input types you might want to choose. Button, checkbox, color, date, email, file, etc., as listed here. You would use that input type tag equals within quotes, whichever one you so choose, and then a closing bracket. So why do we want to use PHP? Well, it can be put anywhere within a document, an HTML document, or it can be stored externally as well. PHP script will start with bracket question mark PHP and end with question mark close bracket, just like so, with all of your PHP code going in the middle. So like with cascading style sheets, CSS, which is .css, like with JavaScript, which is .jss, or .js rather, the default file extension for PHP files is .php. And it can contain HTML as well as PHP within that .php file. The main reason people want to use PHP is because with an HTML file, you can simply right-click and view the page source and see all of the HTML code. With a PHP file, you can only see the HTML code. You don't see any of the PHP code when you view the page source. So this is why we often want to embed our PHP through the form action within our HTML code. It helps enhance our forms so that they actually do something. So this PHP code here allows us to get the name and the email address, as you see in this example here. We input our name, we input our email. So welcome, Matt. Here's your email address. Once you submit, you get the display there. As you'll see a much better example next week, you can also upload files using PHP forms, where you can select a file and upload an image or any different type of file as you choose. And here is the lengthy PHP code associated with that. But in essence, here is what that code is doing. You're specifying a directory, as you'll see again next week. In this instance, it's a folder called uploads. The target file specifies the path of the file to be uploaded. Upload OK equals 1 is not used yet. It'll be used later though. And then image file type holds the file extension of the file in lowercase, whether it be JPEG, GIF, etc. Next, it checks the file image is an actual image or a fake image. Sometimes you may want to use PHP in order to open or read something from a file. In this instance, we're opening to read something, a text file called Web Dictionary. If it doesn't work, it displays an error message, unable to open file. If it is able to read it, it may tell you the size of it, how big it is, and then it closes. You can also write to a specific file. Open a new file. If you can't, you get an error message, unable to open new file. Once it's opened, okay, we now add John Doe, Jane Doe, save it, close it. So $TXT, we now add John Doe, /n gives us a new line. This fwrite now puts that new text into the new file.txt. etc. for Jane Doe. So for one of the potential participation point options you could do for this week is to use PHP, JavaScript, and or HTML to create a contact form, which will accept name, email, and comment as inputs, where the submit button can either return the input or provide an external email noting that you have been given a specific answer. So literally here on slides 25 and 26, we'll give you that HTML and PHP code that will do exactly that. Ignore slide 27 if you so choose to do this in-class exercise for your participation points, because slide 27 is a little outdated and has not worked in a couple of years, unfortunately, as well as slide 28 went with slide 27. So if you're going to choose to do a PHP form in class exercise for the participation points for 129, utilize slides 25 and 26. So next we are going to jump into XHTML. XHTML stands for Extensible Hypertext Markup Language. So it is a more stricter XML-based version of HTML. Basically, when you're writing code in HTML, if you screw something up, the web browser is going to try and interpret what you mean. Whereas if you write the code in XHTML, if you screw up, basically the web browser is going to not compile or load what you've done correctly. That is why XHTML is more commonly used by the experts. It's basically a well-formed HTML. When using XHTML, doc type is mandatory. When using just regular HTML, you just need the HTML tag at the top. You also need the XLNS attribute. And you see all of the other strict requirements of XHTML here on slide 31 as well. So here is an example of how it would look. Notice you have to have the doc type. You have to have the XMNLS here. Whereas, like you said, with the HTML code, you just need to start with the HTML tag, not as advanced. So why is it important? Well, they're often conforming with XML, and they're easier to view, edit, and validate with those XML data tools. They're also a little more helpful with the document object model. And when you use JSON, as we'll touch on momentarily, it's a little easier to parse or stringify information. And here is some more information on some of the important aspects. So we just talked about XML. Well, what is it? Well, XML is Extensible Markup Language. It's used to define customized markup languages. And you're already somewhat familiar with it since you have some understanding of HTML. So it's a software and hardware independence tool for storing and transporting data. It's designed to be self-descriptive. It may be a little hard to understand, but it doesn't really do anything. It just stores information for you. It's like a text file. It's considered a parent language to HTML. It basically just stores information. The tags are custom and defined by author. Whereas with HTML, you have, like your head tag, your H1 tag, your P tag. With XML, you make the tags. However, there are some rules associated with that. The tags can contain letters, numbers, and other characters, but they can't start with a number or punctuation character. They can't start with XML, and they can't contain spaces. So XML attributes must be quoted as in employee type equals permanent. Or you could do something like this, which is the most common way of doing it. Employee tag, type tag, permanent inside it. Close type tag, close employee tag. They both accomplish the same thing, but the second one looks better, is easier to do, and is the more common way of doing things. So XML was designed to carry data. HTML was designed to display data. That is the primary difference between the two of them. As mentioned, XML has no predefined tags like HTML does. You, as the user, create them. You invent them, as long as you follow those specific rules. So why do we use XML? It simplifies data sharing. It simplifies data transport. It can be interchanged between different platforms, and it makes data available. There are also more specific reasons to use XML displayed here on slide 44. So some specific ways people have used XML to store data in the past have been to create a list of books, create a list of transactions, create news article headers, detail weather info, etc. So here's an example. You have your prologue where you set what XML version you have. You have your root, which in this instance is the note tag. Notice all have closing tags, just like HTML. So here we have the close note tag. We have our to tag. So Tove, our from tag. Johnny, our heading tag, reminder, our body tag. Don't forget me this week. So basically, we just sent an email using XML. So you can, if you so choose, use HTML tags within XML, such as bold or italicize. Within XML, you have to have attributes quoted in certain cases. So for example, in this instance, we have a date that needs to be quoted. You may also use entity references within your XML. So less than, greater than, ampersand, etc. Within XML, you may need to use comments. So you would need bracket, exclamation point, dash dash, and then dash dash, bracket at the end as well. So within XML, you can have text, attributes, other elements, or a mix. For example, here we have a rate tag within XML and our rate of $19.99. So our naming rules, element names are case sensitive. Element names must start with a letter or underscore. Element names cannot start with the letters XML, as previously mentioned. Element names can contain letters, digits, hyphens, underscores, and periods, but they cannot contain spaces. Any name can be used. No words are reserved except XML. So you can create different things like person, first name, etc. If you wanted to do longer names like book underscore title, that's fine, but avoid something very long like the underscore title, underscore of, underscore the, underscore book. And then there are some other suggestions on what to avoid as well. So here's an example of Xlink, which is how you would embed certain XML into your web page as you need. So how else or where else could you use XML? Well, within HTML, JavaScript, and PHP. That's why people enjoy using it. XSLT is extensible style sheet language transformations. It helps us transform XML into HTML before it is displayed into a browser. And we use our inline external reference .xsl in order to do that. Well beyond the scope of this course, but helpful to reference. So here's an example of how XML would look. We would have our XML tag and then create an address book tag and then create two addresses here. So first we have an address with a name and an email, and then we have a second address with another name and another email. And you'll notice that within each address, our name is opened and then closed. Our email is open and then closed. You could add another address by copying that code and changing the name and email for each. Next, we have JSON, which is JavaScript Object Notation, another way of storing data. This one is used in order for us to parse or stringify information from certain HTML documents. Basically take out strings, and we want to find certain words, text. This might be the way we go about it. So there's no tags using JSON, but it's human readable. It helps us. It uses arrays and it's quicker to read and write. So here's an example. If you were to create a car, there would be an object with three different properties associated with it. You'd have a make, you'd have a model, and you'd have a price associated with a car object. So here's an example. Car, we just have the car tag. Make, Chevy, close the make tag. Model, Suburban, close the model tag. Price, close the price tag. Then close the car tag. A little simpler than XML. In JSON, as I just mentioned, much simpler. It's all in one line. Don't have to worry about any tags. It's just quote make, colon, quote Chevy, quote model, colon, quote Suburban, quote price, colon, then the price. Notice the last one does not have a comma because that is the ending line. So with JSON, you're going to have different data types associated with it. strings, numbers, objects, for example, address, name, email. You could have arrays, students, Manny, Mo, Jack, booleans, no, null. That's because JSON is, again, JavaScript, Java associated with it. So this is how JSON would be used more likely than not in order to access values within objects. So we create my object. We're looking for a first name, a last name, an age, etc., possibly within an HTML file. So the primary reason you'd use JSON is for parsing. When data is received from a web server, it can be parsed and it becomes a JSON. So we want to find specific text. Okay, person's name John. Here's their birthday. Here's the city they were born. We now create an object with their date of birth in it. Stringify converts a JavaScript option or object into a string, combines it. So now John is 30 from New York, combine all that information together. So here's an example of how JSON would work. Notice here the external reference to a JavaScript file, and it refers to car JSON and car XML, which will simply show each of those based on our body online onload show JavaScript code, which is probably what is inside the scripts.js code. So here is the specific function or information that would be within the show JSON and show XML files. So here would be the JSON code, and here would be the XML code. Again, notice how the JSON code is a little less advanced. Here on slide 69, we have a very lengthy example of how a JSON table would look. If you were to copy that code into your WYSIWYG, assuming everything was working correctly, it would simply give you a visual that looks like this. A table of random books within the JSON data file. As you'll see later in the semester with JavaScript, there is a JSON community online at this link. It goes into great depths on all JSON topics, and it includes using JSON with various programming languages, JavaScript, Python, etc. So if you decided to go about the easier example for the participation points, you can create a book list file in both XML and JSON, meaning you'd have two different files, one called books.xml and one called books.json. Include in your data storage files the following book info: title of book, author of book, and price of book. So if you decided to do this example for your participation points for XML, you'd refer back to slide 61, and for JSON, you'd refer back to slide 62. So here for XML, you would have, instead of car, book. So book, close book. You would have title, close title, and then put some kind of book title here. Then you would have author, closed author, put some kind of author there. And then you would keep price and put some kind of book price there, you know, $5.99, whatever it may be. And then for the JSON example, you would have title here and then an author's name, or a book title rather. And then you would have author here instead of model and whoever the author is. And you would keep price and put whatever the price of the book would be. And I will put this recording within the class lecture recording folder here. And again, go ahead and email me either the PHP form in class exercise or this XML JSON exercise I just covered. And if you need assistance, have any questions after this recording, go ahead and join the link and ask away.